Today on the Matt Walsh Show, the mayor of Minneapolis wept in front of the golden casket of George Floyd, pandered, debased himself in a million ways, and yet the Democrat Party in his city still endorsed a Muslim socialist from Somalia over him. There's a lesson in that we'll discuss. Also, Representative Maria Salazar continues to push for amnesty for illegal aliens in the name of dignity, she says. Hunter Biden lashes out at George Clooney in hilarious fashion. And a woman complains to the media after she somehow managed to dress in such a sloppy and unkempt fashion that she wasn't allowed to board a Spirit Airlines flight, of all things. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Look, if you're a responsible gun owner, you know the struggle. You want your firearm secure from kids and guests, but when you actually need it, you don't want to be fumbling with keys or codes while your heart's racing. That's exactly why StopBox USA created the StopBox Pro. This thing is completely mechanical, no batteries to die, no electronics to glitch, no apps to crash. Just a brilliant 5-button system that's unique to you. Once you've got it down, your muscle memory takes over. No thinking, just reacting. Plus, here's the cool part. Everything is made right here in the USA, so you're supporting American jobs, getting quality craftsmanship you can trust at the same time. The StopBox Pro is also TSA compliant, so you can travel with confidence, and they've got vehicle safes, chamber locks, and other gear to keep you prepared wherever life takes you. For a limited time only, our listeners are getting a crazy deal on StopBox. Get 10% off your entire order when you use code WALSH10. And for even better savings, shop their bundles for the best deals on their best-selling products. Check out their bundles and save an exclusive 10% off site-wide when you use code WALSH10 at StopBoxUSA.com. Discover a better way to balance security and readiness with StopBox. There's the old quote from Milton Friedman that nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program. The income tax, both in this country and Britain, was supposed to be a temporary measure to finance wars, in our case, the Civil War. Farm subsidies were supposed to be an emergency measure for the Great Depression. The Patriot Act was supposed to be a temporary measure to thwart terrorists before it became a convenient way to spy on domestic political campaigns. In every case, the government introduces a policy claiming it's temporary, and then just like 15 days to slow the spread, and many others we could name, it continued indefinitely. But even with that history in mind, you still have to stand back and admire the sheer gall involved in the Temporary Protected Status Program, otherwise known as TPS. In the case of TPS, Congress literally put the word temporary in the name when they came up with the idea in 1990. They could not have been more explicit. The plan was to give certain foreign nationals a temporary protected status in this country so they could live here and work here rather than going back home after their homeland had suffered some kind of terrible catastrophe. And yet, temporary protected status has never actually been temporary. Take Haiti, for example. They received temporary protected status all the way back in 2010 on the basis of, quote, extraordinary and temporary conditions in Haiti that prevented nationals of Haiti from returning in safety. That was the catastrophic magnitude 7 earthquake. And originally, Haiti's temporary protected status, which shielded Haitians from deportation in this country, was supposed to last 18 months, but it was never actually terminated. It kept renewing over and over and over again for more than 15 years. Essentially, deporting Haitians became impossible. And many other countries received similar treatment. South Sudan received TPS in 2011. It's been constantly renewed ever since. That's well over a decade of temporary protection. Ditto for both Yemen and Nepal, which each received the designation back in 2015. Nicaragua received temporary protected status in 1999, which continued through the first Trump administration in 2017. And then the Biden administration immediately re-extended it. Venezuela has had temporary protected status since 2021. Now, for all these years, TPS has functioned very clearly as a backdoor way to admit hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals, people from some of the most dysfunctional countries on the planet, into this country and shield them from deportation. It also grants these people work authorization on top of that. Now, to their credit, since taking office in January, the Trump administration has been systematically ending TPS for various countries, one by one. Just last night, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the Trump administration can proceed with its plan to remove Afghans and Cameroonians from the TPS program. Additionally, the administration has moved to end the program for Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, and Nicaragua. all of this is progress, obviously. We should celebrate it. Temporary programs should not be permanent. That's especially true when the temporary program is effectively a permanent hall pass for the entire third world. But there is one country that up until now has not had its TPS status revoked by the Trump administration or any other administration. Somalia first received a TPS designation in September of 1991. That is 34 years ago under this temporary status. But the designation remains active today. The current extension isn't set to expire for another year. And that needs to change as quickly as possible. And then once TPS is ended for Somalia, we need to begin mass deportations of Somalis in this country, which should also include, in many cases, denaturalization. And that's because after decades of unrestricted migration into the United States, Somalis have now taken over and rendered dysfunctional several major American cities, most notably Minneapolis. They have imported their third world hellhole that they don't even want to live in to the United States. And that's not surprising since Somalis aren't in this country under temporary protected status because of an earthquake or some other natural disaster. They're here because they've rendered their own homeland into an unlivable wasteland. So it's not exactly a great shock that the same thing is happening to places like Minneapolis. Now, there's no better sign that the Trump administration needs to act on Somali migration and quickly than the rise of a Muslim Somali socialist named Omar Fateh, who now stands a very good chance of becoming the next mayor of Minneapolis. We've talked about Omar Fateh before in the context of his open admission that he's working on behalf of Somalis instead of Americans, as well as his disparaging and false attacks on white people, who he says are the greatest threat in the country right now. On Saturday night, to the surprise of many political observers who haven't been paying any attention, Fateh won the endorsement of Minnesota's Democratic Farmer Labor Party, or DFL. In case you're not familiar with Minnesota politics, the DFL is the state's equivalent of the Democrat Party. The DFL is affiliated with Democrats. They're functionally the same thing. Fateh won the party's endorsement over the incumbent mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, who's running for re-election. So this is not a meme candidate that we're talking about. Fateh is not some figment of the right's imagination. With the full backing of the Democrat Party establishment, Minneapolis is about to elect potentially their own Zohran Mamdani. And for their part, the Somali community in Minneapolis is obviously very excited about that prospect. Here's a clip from his celebration after he locked up the DFL endorsement. Watch.
عليكم مقعي وايكي حسن وعادوا فرحنا مانتا ولكن عمر فاتح نقدر next mayor of Minneapolis وهيستوريك واي وعرجنا Somalia دقيق Minneapolis إلى صباحا وعودي.
So they're not speaking English. There are no white people in the shot. If you don't have any context, you might think this footage is from Mogadishu, except, well, the building behind them is not falling apart. So that's the one giveaway. Not yet anyway. Give these Somalis a few more years and I'm sure they'll be able to replicate that bit of local color from their homeland as well. Now, recently, when I pointed out how grotesque this is, that American City has imported so many foreign socialists from the third world that third world socialists have started winning elections, I was predictably shouted down as a racist, and I was told that, in reality, Fateh's support is predominantly coming from white liberal women. But that's not actually true. I mean, it's not even close to true. As of 2018, according to Census Bureau data, more than 43,000 people born in Somalia were living in Minnesota, and nearly 100,000 Minnesotans spoke Somali at home. Keep in mind, the population of Minneapolis, where the vast majority of Somalis live, is only around 425,000 people. And these are just the official estimates from 7 years ago. Again, 7 years ago. By now, we can safely assume the population of Somalis has exploded even further. Actually, we don't have to assume anything. Instead of relying on official statistics, we can just walk down to the local courthouse. That's what a lawyer named Phil Holloway did recently. He pulled up a list of all the pending cases that would be heard in Hennepin County, Minnesota in the following week. Hennepin County includes Minneapolis. The lawyer grabbed the court calendar, in other words, and take a look at what he found straight from the courthouse. Again, if you showed this context, this document with no context, you would assume that this is a list of pending court cases in some failed state in the third world, not the largest city in Minnesota. Under party names, you have to strain to find a single American in the entire list. It's on the screen right now. Try finding an American. There's a lot of Abdis and Mohammeds and Abdullahs. There's a Fartoon Abdullah and a Ridwan Abdi. There's a Haban Abdurrahman, a Mohammed Nasir Abdallah. But at least on the first 2 pages, there aren't any Bobs or Pauls or Steves, strangely enough. And that tells us, as if we needed more confirmation, why a Muslim socialist from Somalia named Omar Fateh is currently on track to be the next mayor of Minneapolis. He's not just getting support from a large number of brainwashed American women with suicidal empathy, although that's also happening. But a huge base of his support is foreigners, just like himself. And they're not put off by his policies or his general vibes, let's say. You know, a very large number of Somalis, nearly half by some estimates, are the product of incest, of first or second cousin marriages, which explains why you can often identify a Somali just by looking at them, as you can in Omar Fateh's case. Now, of course, you're not supposed to notice that or talk about it, but, I mean, it's just true. At the very least, we can conclude that Somalis definitely aren't repulsed by Omar Fateh's connection to the federally funded childhood nutrition nonprofit known as Feeding Our Future, which is one of the many scams that Somalis have been running in Minneapolis. To give you some background on how this scam worked, last year, 3 individuals whose names are Haji Osman Salad, Sharmaki Issa, and Kadra Abdi pleaded guilty to wire fraud in a $250 million wire fraud scheme, where they claimed that they had served more than 15 million meals to children during the pandemic through their restaurants and shell companies. But it wasn't true. They spent the money on apartments and sports cars instead. And then a few months ago, the Trump DOJ announced that a federal jury had convicted 2 more individuals in a similar scheme. Quoting from the DOJ, Amy Bach and Salim Saeed took advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to carry out a massive fraud scheme that stole money meant to feed children. The defendants falsely claimed to have served 91 million meals, for which they fraudulently received nearly 250 million in federal funds. That money did not go to feed kids. Instead, it was used to fund their lavish life. A few years ago, surprising absolutely no one, Omar Fateh publicly defended Feeding Our Future. He attacked people who suggested the nonprofit might be an elaborate scam. Watch.
And I want to thank also Amy and her team, Feeding Our Future, for making this first court victory a reality. So first, I want to say thank you to all of you. In that meeting, we were asking what was going on, and we asked very directly, was there any evidence of fraud? Was there any concerns or suspicions? And they told us that there was 0 evidence. Nothing was there. So to us, that was immoral, what was going on. And I see this most recent victory coming from not just our office, but our other electeds, from Ilhan's office and Ali that's here, from the Feeding Our Future staff, from all of you coming together, because it's not just the East African fight, just like our brother just said right now. It was affecting our Black community, our Latino community, our minority kids, our working families, all of us. And MDE and the state that's already failing all of us, coming in consistently last in terms of servicing our students of color, underperforming schools, and now to have this, I think it's immoral. And for this most recent news to come out that they're trying to make everybody come back and reapply, I think that's wrong, and it shows you that the fight is going to continue.
At the time, Fateh was feeling confident because the Minnesota Department of Education had just lost a lawsuit which allowed the Feeding Our Future fraud to continue. Somalis in Minnesota thought their fraud was untouchable after that lawsuit was dismissed. But after the federal criminal search warrants started coming in for Feeding Our Future, Fateh changed his tone a little bit. He quickly returned 7 political contributions from people who were directly named in Feeding Our Future search warrants. We don't have to wonder why he was nervous. Here's reporting from one local news station on testimony from one of the Feeding Our Future trials. Quote, testifying quietly on the witness stand Tuesday, Hannah American told the jury about the most brazen fake invoice she submitted in the midst of the $250 million federal meal fraud during the COVID-19 pandemic. Marekajan, I guess is how you pronounce that. I don't know, American, who has already pleaded guilty to her crimes, claimed in August 2021 to have provided $3.15 million worth of food to a fraudulent meal site called House of Refuge. Marekajan testified that Amy Bach and other fraud participants also used Senator Omar Fateh as a pawn during the legal fight with the Minnesota Department of Education. She said Fateh, who is now running for mayor of Minneapolis, made a phone call on their behalf to Attorney General Keith Ellison as part of their attempt to derail the Minnesota Department of Education's fraud prevention and paint the department as racist. Well, that sounds familiar. When you're called out for committing fraud, just scream racism. It worked for Ilhan Omar. It worked for BLM. So why wouldn't it work for Omar Fateh and feeding our future? And keep in mind, there's a lot more fraud where this came from. As staggering as this is, $250 million in fraud, you have to remember this is just what the feds uncovered. Altogether, it's safe to assume that Somalis in Minnesota have been robbing billions of dollars from taxpayers in various scams. Just imagine what they'd be able to do if they run the city from the mayor's office. You won't have a city left. And, of course, that's the whole point of importing these people. If there's a note of humor and optimism to strike here, although there probably isn't one, it comes from looking at the voting procedures that were used at the DFL convention. Turns out that as part of this endorsement process, the Democrats experimented with electronic balloting instead of using paper ballots, which are the traditional method. This is obviously their plan for the entire country, as we all know. And on Saturday, it was a complete disaster to the point that hundreds of ballots weren't even counted, which is a big deal when only around 750 delegates are involved in total. Watch.
Well, the first ballot, there were probably about 700 delegates there, but only about 300 votes counted. And they had tried an electronic voting process, and apparently it wasn't as efficient as they had hoped, and meaning that votes may not have counted. Mayor Frye's campaign had left the convention by the time Fateh was endorsed. And by the time Fateh was endorsed, they just asked people to raise their credentials, and they counted them, or they got a voice vote of endorsement. That's not the way these endorsement conventions work. You have to count ballots, and they did not do that.
Now, if you're one of the few Americans still living in Minneapolis, this is what you have to hold on to. You have to hope that in reality it was a voting glitch that led the establishment Democrat Party to endorse a Muslim socialist from Somalia to be your next mayor. In other words, you have to hope that your party is so incompetent and corrupt that it can't even count 750 votes. That's the best case scenario for Democrats in Minneapolis at the moment. But regardless of what went wrong in this convention, the fact remains that Minneapolis has fallen. There's just no getting around it. This isn't the same city that it was just 2 decades ago. The current mayor, Jacob Frye, infamously wept before the golden casket of George Floyd. He pandered to BLM mobs after they torched police stations and destroyed local businesses and entire city blocks for an entire summer. And he often appeared at events for Somali migrants in Minneapolis, beclowning himself as much as he possibly could. Here's one of those events. This is from last year's Somalia Independence Day celebration in Minneapolis. Watch this.
Somalia anulato! Somalia anulato!
So Jacob Frye debased himself on camera repeatedly. He spoke the language. He performed the tribal dances. He even chanted "Long live Somalia" as he celebrated Somalia's independence. Even though Somali independence, let's be clear, was obviously a failure. It's not something you celebrate. Like it didn't work out. Like many other countries you could name, Somalia was better off as a colony. The country had order and stability then. It had a functioning infrastructure. Its currency had value. It had an education system. It had these like basic things you need to be a functioning country. And now that they've kicked out the dastardly European colonizers, they have none of those things. Their country is now a dystopian hellscape, which is why they're all fleeing to the United States. But Jacob Frye was willing to pretend that Somali independence was worth celebrating, just like he was willing to speak the language and perform some ridiculous dances because he thought it meant that he could hold on to political power. But as Frye discovered on Saturday, all of his self-flagellation and pandering was not enough. It was never going to be enough because unlike testosterone-deficient, self-loathing American leftists like Jacob Frye, Somalis are solely interested in advancing their own national and ethnic interests. That's what they care about. And when they're given the opportunity to exploit a suicidal civilization to use them as a host so they can advance their own interests, often through fraud and exploitation, they'll do it every time. The best case scenario is that the Trump administration steps in immediately and begins deporting as many Somalis as possible while ending any temporary protected status we've been affording them for decades. The alternative is that Somalis are left to do to Minneapolis what they did to Somalia. Americans will become refugees in their own homeland. And Somalis, having destroyed a city of 450,000 people, will move on to their next target until they either succeed or something stops them. Should either of those possibilities come to pass, it'll be a lot less pleasant than carrying out some orderly deportations, which we have every right to do right now. The Democrats' endorsement of Omar Fateh is a very clear and obvious sign, one that can't be ignored any longer. For the safety and well-being of everyone living in this country, we have no choice but to end the fraud. The rise of Omar Fateh has demonstrated beyond any doubt that a decisive response is necessary. And now it's time that the Trump administration gave Somalis the exact same treatment it gave to Haitians and Nicaraguans and Venezuelans and Afghans, and send them back to the country that they still call their home. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Being a husband, father, and host of my own show means life never slows down. Imagine trying to eat 31 different fruits and vegetables every day. Sounds pretty miserable and time-consuming, and frankly, I just don't want to deal with all that. I'd rather go get something deep-fried and unhealthy sometimes. But with Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables every day with 31 different whole fruit and vegetable ingredients. Balance of Nature takes fruits and veggies, freeze-dries them, turns them into a powder, and puts them into capsules. You take your fruit and veggie capsules every day, and your body knows what to do with them. Go to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code Walsh for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Walsh. We talked a little bit last week about Maria Salazar, Republican representative, doing a major push for an amnesty bill. She wants to give amnesty to millions of illegal aliens. She's calling it the Dignity Act. Now, supporters of this bill claim that it's not really amnesty because it doesn't necessarily grant citizenship to all the illegal aliens protected by it. So it's not amnesty. But here is, which is what you find of people that support amnesty and push amnesty, they will always claim that it's not amnesty. But here is Salazar on a local news station yesterday giving the whole game away. Listen.
We give them dignity. At some point in the future, another legislator will write another law to give them path to citizenship. Right now, what we need to do is to buy peace for these people, allow them to stay, to continue working, because they are needed. You see, what I'm trying to do is to bring some common sense, which is the least common of all senses, to this conversation. The economy needs them. They do not have a criminal record. They have not gone into trouble. They have been here for a long time. They have roots in the country. Let them stay. Don't give them any type of federal programs. And allow them to pay taxes, help the Social Security Fund, and let them stay and contribute with the economy with no criminal record. What is wrong with that? We need them.
Okay, so let's allow them to stay, grant them legal status, and then someone else will come along and make a bill to give them citizenship. You know, that, so amnesty, in other words, that's what they're talking about. That's amnesty. I mean, you could keep shouting the word dignity all you want, but this is amnesty, and there's nothing dignified about it. It is dignity for a person to be held accountable and expected to follow the law. Enforcing the law is dignity. That, you want to give dignity to someone who breaks the law. The best way to do it is to punish them, is to enforce the law. But here's Maria Salazar again. This is from a press conference late last week, continuing her push for this amnesty that she won't call amnesty. And listen to what she says.
President Trump, sir, the same God who saved you from death in Pennsylvania 1 year ago and who put you back in the Oval Office against all odds is the same God Almighty who millions and millions are begging to for some type of dignity, not amnesty. Sir, I believe that you could be for immigration what Lincoln was for slavery and Reagan was for communism. You are a businessman who understands our economy needs a reliable working force in areas where other Americans don't participate. You stopped Iran on its tracks. You stopped China from eating our lunch. You took the economic oxygen away from Maduro, and you signed the BBB the day that you said you were going to sign it. You have been called to do this, to fix this 40-year mess with just one signature, yours. Human dignity is one of the 7 pillars of American conservatism. For that reason, Mr. President, the eye of history is upon us. Some of the most shameful moments in our past as a country relates to how we have treated immigrants who are not criminals.
Some of our most shameful moments as a country relate to how we treat immigrants, she says. Right. Well, a couple of questions. First of all, what do you mean by our? What do you mean by we, Maria? Okay, you're Cuban. Your greatest priority is to destroy our national sovereignty and identity. You talk about American history like it's something to be ashamed of. So there's no we here. You're not American. You clearly don't like this country or identify yourself with it. So there is no we here. You want to talk about we, go back to Cuba and talk about we. I mean, this is how dare you come here and start telling us that we aren't allowed to have a country anymore? Okay, how dare you come here and tell us that, oh, it's shameful. It's shame. You should be ashamed. How dare you? Get the hell out. Seriously. Standing there talking about shameful moments. I know one shameful moment in American history. It's when you got elected. That's one shameful moment. And then notice what else she said. She said, our economy needs a reliable workforce in areas where other Americans don't participate. Again, a few problems here. She says other Americans. So to her, illegal immigrants who aren't citizens are still Americans, right? Some guy who arrived here from Guatemala 10 minutes ago is just as American as you. In fact, he's an American. You are an other American. And not only that, but according to Maria, you as an American refuse to participate in wide swaths of the economy. Americans just refuse to participate. We're the problem, says Maria. We should be ashamed. We're the problem. Well, this is all nonsense. As I've explained, as many of us have explained countless times, there are not any jobs that Americans refuse to do. The idea that there are entire sections of the economy where Americans are folding their arms and saying, I won't do that. That's beneath me. That idea is just ridiculous. Anyone who makes that claim clearly despises Americans. Very low opinion of Americans. No, Americans will do all those jobs, just that these employers won't hire Americans because they'd prefer to use illegal slave labor because it's cheaper. So Americans will do it. They won't do it for actual slave wages, though. So yeah, you could get an illegal alien in there to pick asparagus or whatever and pay them 50 cents an hour. And you're not going to find any Americans who will work for that. But the problem is not with the American worker in that case. It's with it's with the organization, the employer, and also with the government policies that allow all this to happen. Hunter Biden, the crackhead son of Joe Biden, showed up on some kind of podcast and did a lengthy interview, which is unusual. I watched some clips of it. I think this might be the first time I've heard the guy speak. I don't know, because he didn't pop up in interviews very often during the Biden years, is the point. They kept this junkie locked away in a dungeon somewhere. But now those days are over, and so Hunter's out in public again, and he's not happy. And not much notable from the interview, really, but I did think this part was funny. So here he is lashing out at all the celebrities who turned on his dad, especially George Clooney. Watch.
You know what? He supposedly treats his friends really well. You know what I mean? Buys them things. And he's got a really great place in Lake Como, and he's great friends with Barack Obama. What do you have to do with anything? Why do I have to listen to you? What right do you have to step on a man who's given 52 years of his life to the service of this country and decide that you, George Clooney, are going to take out basically a full-page ad in the New York Times to me and James Carville, who hasn't run a race in 40 years, and David Axelrod, who had one success in his political life, and that was Barack Obama. And that was because of Barack Obama, not because of David Axelrod. And David Plouffe, and all of these guys, and the Pod Save America guys, who were junior speechwriters in, on Barack Obama's Senate staff, who have been dining out on the relationship with him for years, making millions of dollars. The Anita Dunns of the world, who's made $40-50 million off the Democratic Party. They're all going to insert their judgment over a man who has figured out, unlike anybody else, how to get elected to the United States Senate over 7 times, how to pass more legislation than any president in history, how to have a better midterm election than anybody in history, and how to garner more votes than any president that has ever run. And they're going to replace their judgment for his.
Not to mention...
Who's Jake Tapper's audience? Jake Tapper...
My mom or something? I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
For real, though. I don't even think it's your mom anymore.
No.
By the numbers, what influence does Jake Tapper have over anything? He has the smallest audience on cable news. And beyond that, I think that the book is right now on Amazon that he put out. I mean, his ratings just went to after he put the book out.
You know, I don't say this very often, but Hunter Biden is right about most of that stuff anyway. Not the stuff about Joe Biden serving his country with distinction, but all the other stuff. He's bitter because he thought he was a power player. He thought his family was a dynasty. He thought his family was royalty. And then his whole family got tossed to the side by the people who actually hold the power, which is a great lesson here. Joe Biden spent his whole career desperately clawing for power. He sold his dignity, he sold his integrity, he sold his soul, everything. He gave up everything in this pursuit. And in the end, they chewed him up and spit him out, and now he will die in disgrace as a senile and forgotten man, an embarrassment, a humiliation. And all his children and grandchildren have been exiled. They're not welcome among the elite. So Biden wanted a dynasty, and he got the opposite. That's the lesson here, and I think it's an important lesson anyway. All right, Stephen Colbert, speaking of humiliating, did his first show since the news that his show's being canceled. And he had a response to Trump, who's been gloating over, rightly so, over Colbert's cancellation. Watch.
I got to say, it makes sense we'd be canceled. I get it, guys. And thanks again. Okay, thanks again to the network. In a completely unrelated story, on Friday, Donald Trump posted, "I absolutely love that Colbert got fired. His talent was even less than his ratings." How dare you? How dare you, sir? Would an untalented man be able to compose the following satirical witticism? Go yourself.
Wow, that's some edgy stuff. That's edgy. Jeez Louise. Did you hear how he said the F word? Did you hear that? You hear that guy said the F word? Man. And then Jon Stewart on his show had a very similar message, and it just delivered a bit more theatrically. Watch.
Go yourself! Wait, bring it down. Let's bring it down. Let it be quiet. Yourself, just go yourself. Everybody! Yourself, just go yourself. Yourself, just go yourself. Yourself, just go yourself.
Wow, did you see that again? he also said the F word, but he said it like a bunch of times. Wow. These guys are out of control, man. These guys are edgy. This is provocative. I mean, if you're a 12-year-old in 1996, this is provocative stuff. If I was 12 and it was 1996 and I saw that on TV, I would be blown away. Right? I'd be telling all my friends about it in middle school. I saw someone say the F word on TV last night. But for everyone else, this is just lame as hell, and mostly because it's witless. And that's the best way to describe what passes for comedy these days. It's just witless. A good comedian would have an actual, joke. A good comedian would come on the air and have a series of hilarious, devastating jokes ready to go for this whole situation. A good comedian would revel in the opportunity. A good comedian would, this is your chance for something like an iconic moment, right? Your show was just canceled. For some reason, they're letting you stay on the air for another year, almost another year. But it was just announced your show was canceled. This is your first show back after your show was canceled. This is an opportunity for a hilarious, self-deprecating, biting, edgy monologue. You got nothing to lose. You're getting fired anyway. And so this is a time to just do something that's actually edgy and provocative and really funny. And instead, this is what we get. His whole writing staff, keep in mind, Stephen Colbert has a writing staff. He's got 20 people on a writing staff sitting around in a room. And they had all weekend to think about this. This was a Monday show. They had all weekend to think about, what are we going to do? What is the devastating joke that we're going to come back with it's going to stand the test of time? People are going to think about this moment. And what they came up with was, go F yourself. That's it. Never mind the absolutely delusional idea that this all happened because CBS is terrified of Donald Trump. These people can never let go of their martyrdom fantasy, their fantasy that they're living in the fictional world of, one of the 2 or 3 books they've ever read in their lives. The fantasy that their Harry Potter and the Trump administration is whatever what's Slytherin? Were those the bad guys? They divided into different schools and there was like the bad school, the evil school. Is that how it worked? Anyway, that's their fantasy. And, they can't get over that. And meanwhile, the most salient criticism of Donald Trump has always been, and still is, frankly, to a lesser extent than it was the first term, but still, has been that he's too hesitant to wield his power and punish his enemies. Hopefully that's changing. We talked about this yesterday. Trump is tweeting furiously or truthing furiously memes and videos of Barack Obama and the Obama officials being arrested, put in orange jumpsuits and all that. And what we've seen in the past is that we get these tweets and Truth Social posts and all of that, and people go on talk about it on Fox News, but then it doesn't actually happen. Like none of those people are actually arrested. That's the way it's happened. Hopefully that's going to change. But in any case, that has been, if you're going to be critical of the Trump administration for one thing in particular, it has been a failure to wield power, not whatever fantasy world that these people think they're living in. All right, one more headline, some more entertainment news, because why not? This one, it's just, as a child of the 90s, this jumped out at me. Deadline reports Captain Planet and the Planeteers' long-awaited live-action adaptation is getting a big boost and a major twist. In a competitive situation, Netflix has landed for development Captain Planet, a live-action series based on the cult animated show. Okay, that's all you need to know. The long-awaited Captain Planet live-action reboot is coming. Long-awaited. By who exactly? I've never met anyone who's waiting for that. Have you? Has it ever come up in conversation with anyone in your life at any point ever? That what they're really waiting, you know what I'm waiting for? You know what I can't wait for? the Captain Planet live action reboot. But there is some poetry in it, I suppose, because in our decadent society, all we do is recycle stuff that already existed. That's all Hollywood's been doing for decades now. Mainstream Hollywood, of course, that's literally all they've been doing for decades. So why not recycle a 90s cartoon about recycling? It makes sense in a certain way. And Captain Planet, I think, is instructive, though. I was thinking about this. Not instructive in the way that it intended to be, but instructive for anyone who imagines, as it seems some people do anyway, that the really sort of in-your-face woke propaganda started recently. And that is not the case at all. The millennial generation grew up on left-wing propaganda in a big way. That's why my generation turned out the way it did. And in some cases, the propaganda was more extreme. It was more blatant, more radical than the stuff you see today. Captain Planet is a perfect example. Now, fortunately, it didn't work. I mean, the left-wing propaganda from Hollywood did work, but it didn't work from Captain Planet because the show was just so unfathomably lame. I remember watching it when I was like 6 years old. When I was 6 years old, I remember watching this show and going, what the hell is this bull? I remember turning over to my mom and saying, what is this bull, Mom? Are you seeing this? That's how I talked when I was 6. Not really. Kids, don't talk that way. But just to give you an idea, if this was before your time, and this is the show they want to bring back, Captain Planet, and this is a clip that was going viral on X. So people were actually shocked that this is the kind of stuff that we were watching back in the day. But Captain Planet had an entire episode that explicitly promoted eugenics. Watch this.
Go Planet! Did you know the population of the world is now more than 5 billion?
Wow, that is a lot of people.
And it's increasing by 90 million people each year.
But the Earth is not getting any bigger.
So when it is your turn to have a family,
keep it small. The more people there are, the more pressure we put on our planet. So take it easy on our Earth and conserve what you can.
So that was a message to an audience of children, right? There are too many people on Earth. It's bad to have a lot of kids. There are too many people. Have fewer kids. This is the kind of stuff they were saying to kids in like 1992. So wokeness is not new. But that's not my favorite example. Since we're taking a trip down memory lane here, I have to just play this. This was my favorite episode of Captain Planet. I still remember it to this day. Or at least I thought I remembered it, right? I thought I remembered it. It's kind of, it's sort of like that. What was the Shazam, the Sinbad movie that we all remember from the 90s, but didn't exist? And that's like, I do remember that. Apparently never happened. And I wasn't sure if this one episode of Captain Planet, I wasn't sure if this fell into that category, because I remember an episode where a kid got AIDS, and it's not funny, the kid had AIDS, but he was a cartoon. So, and then Captain Planet flew down from heaven or wherever he was coming from and gave a speech about how it's still okay to hug him even though he has AIDS. And I thought I remembered that, but I wasn't sure if it was some kind of weird fever dream that I had. But yes, it turns out that my memory was correct. This episode actually happened. Again, this is the kind of stuff that millennials grew up watching. Okay, so it explains a lot. And here it is.
What's he doing here? He's not gonna infect my players.
Get him out of here! He's got AIDS!
It's okay, Coach. I don't want to cause trouble.
Stay put, Todd.
This is supposed to be a school, but I think these people need a little education about the HIV virus. May I have your attention, please? A lot of you are worried about AIDS, and there's a rat in your midst who's been spreading lies. Give him the facts, Coach.
You can't get AIDS from casual contact. Hugging, touching, they're okay. You can use the same water fountain or eat in the same cafeteria. It's safe.
You've been led astray by lies. Todd hasn't changed.
That's right. He's the same kid who played his heart out for you right here on this court last week.
Deal with the real, people. Get the facts. If Todd had any other disease, you'd be cheering him on.
Yeah, if Todd had any other disease, you'd be cheering him on. If Todd had herpes, you'd all be applauding and saying, yay, herpes. If Todd had gonorrhea, you'd be throwing a parade right now and saying, hey, look at gonorrhea, man. Isn't he so great with his gonorrhea? But now that he has AIDS, suddenly it's a problem. Suddenly everyone's all weird about it. That was Captain Planet's speech. You got to feel bad for old Todd. I got to say, you got to feel bad for the kid. I mean, first of all, he has AIDS. So that's a tough break. And second, you got the coach of the team and Captain Planet giving a speech about his AIDS to the whole auditorium. It's humiliating. If I were Todd and I was in this situation, I would want Captain Planet to go to the audience and say, hey, I know you've heard the rumors that Todd has AIDS. He doesn't. He's fine. That's how you'd want Captain Planet to save the day. Like everyone's whispering about how you have AIDS, and then Captain Planet shows up. And so I'd be saying to Captain Planet, oh, thank God you're here. Can you go tell these people I don't have AIDS? Instead, Captain Planet turns to the crowd and says, attention, everyone. Listen now. Yes, Todd here, who's standing right here, he has AIDS. You are all correct. This person right here, Todd, right here, this guy has AIDS. Just so everyone knows. Put it on the morning announcement tomorrow. But the good news is you could still shake his hand unless he has an open wound, in which case I wouldn't. So that's rough. That's a rough series of events for Todd. But this is what Captain Planet did. He had godlike superpowers, and he was more powerful than Superman. But all he ever did was fly onto the scene and give a speech and then leave. That was it. Like a real waste of talent, honestly, a waste of skill. Yeah, it's like if the Hulk, the only thing he ever did was show up to, open pickle jars. It's just like, it's overkill. It's we don't need you for that, is what I'm saying. And by the way, there was, when you watch that, if you're from a different generation and you watch that, and it seems totally bizarre, it was, but, and again, explains a lot. That's the theme here. There was a lot of this kind of stuff for, my generation growing up, like AIDS content. There was a ton of AIDS-related content for kids. I can remember being in health class in like 5th grade and having a whole subject. It was like a whole course on AIDS. And meanwhile, of course, no one in this class has to worry about this. If you're not using intravenous drugs and you're not engaging in homosexual activity, you're not going to get AIDS. You'll be fine. But they didn't want to tell you that, so they wanted to tell you it was an equal opportunity disease. And I honestly believe that's the starting. Then COVID happens, decades later, and you got a bunch of millennials who were freaking out about it, total hypochondriacs. And I think that this is part of the reason why, is that a lot of millennials grew up being told that about all these horrific diseases, and we were told that anyone can get them. It doesn't matter what kind of lifestyle you lead. I think it turned everyone into a bunch of panicked hypochondriacs, all because of Captain Planet. Okay, let's get to the comment section.
If you're a man, it's required that you grow a beard. Hey, we're the Sweet Baby Gang.
If you're stressed about back taxes, maybe you've missed the April deadline, or maybe your books are just a mess. Well, don't wait. The IRS is cracking down. Penalties add up fast. 5% per month, up to 25% just for not filing. But there's help. Tax Network USA can take the burden off your shoulders and stop the spiral before it gets worse. They've helped thousands of Americans, whether you're an employee, a small business owner, or haven't filed in years. Messy books, no problem. They've seen it all and know exactly how to clean it up. With direct access to powerful IRS programs and expert negotiators on your side, Tax Network USA knows how to win. You'll get a free consultation, and if you qualify, they may even be able to reduce or eliminate what you owe. More importantly, they'll help protect you from wage garnishments or bank levies. So don't wait for the next IRS letter. Call 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh. Talk to a real expert at Tax Network USA. Take the pressure off. Let Tax Network USA handle your tax issues. For all the jokes about the Coldplay kiss cam, I didn't hear anyone thinking about the man's wife and kids or the woman's husband and family. They've been humiliated and their lives are forever changed. Thank you for always speaking up for traditional families. Your wife and children are truly blessed, as are you. Yeah, that's what makes adultery so evil. It is. And you can always And you can always tell the cheaters because they're the ones who react very negatively when you talk about the evils of adultery. They don't want to see themselves as evil people because who does? But if you're willing to ruin the lives of your spouse and your children and tear their world apart just for your own sexual gratification, then you're like, that's evil. That is incredibly evil. And you're also someone who I would never trust. And that's one of the reasons why adultery is not a private sin. I know there are a lot of people saying that, oh, this is these people on the kiss cam, that they're getting such a tough break, that this should not be public and they're being publicly humiliated. I don't feel sorry for them. I do feel sorry for their family. I don't feel sorry for them because, number one, they are shamelessly, blatantly, like, you're married. You're in a place with thousands of people and thousands of cameras, and this is someone you work. This is the case of the CEO. This is your subordinate. And, so you're flaunting it. So it deserves to be public for that reason. I think it deserves to be public in general because adultery is not a private sin. It is a public sin. For one thing, it has societal consequences. You're destroying your family. You're damaging your children. And then your hurt, damaged children go out into the world. And that becomes our problem. That's number one. And number two is if you are the sort of person who would betray and lie to the people closest to you on earth, that's a detail about you that has relevance. It has relevance to me. That means I don't want to be your friend or business partner or associate because I can't trust you. Because if you're willing to do that to someone, if you make a promise to somebody, the most important promise you'll ever make, and you're willing to betray them, then of course you would do it to me. If you can find a way to go out and betray your marriage vows and then come home to your children and look them in the eyes, if you're able to do that, then you're someone I just can't trust. You are way too comfortable lying. And again, if you'll betray the people closest to you on earth, then if you'll betray anyone, of course you would. If the incentive is great enough. One of the most important things a father does for a child is love his mother. Andrew Tate may be a father to many children, but he isn't a father to any of them. Well, it's been said many times because it's true that the best way to love your children is to love your spouse. That's why you should prioritize your spouse. That's why your spouse should come first, should be the priority in the home. And that is the best way. And that's also the best way to prioritize your children is to prioritize your spouse, prioritize the marriage. I'm pretty stone-hearted these days, but Matt's epilogue made me cry. One of the most beautiful testimonies to the commitment to a family I've ever heard. I don't know if you're a man or not. If you are, as you know, I have strict rules for when crying is allowed. And crying because you're overcome by emotion from one of my podcast monologues is an acceptable occasion. That's actually the only acceptable time. It turns out that's the only time. That's the only time I'll allow it. If you're crying because you're watching the show and you're just so the beauty of it is so much to behold, and then you could that's okay. That's acceptable. Let's see. And then finally, without a doubt, the best standing monologue Matt has ever given. Every young man should listen to this. Yes, the system is rigged against you, but there are good Christian women out there who are looking for you. Be patient, be vigilant, and don't settle for anything less than a godly woman. Yeah, the system is rigged in a lot of ways. We do need to fix that. But in the meantime, you can't put your life on hold or squander your opportunity to live the kind of life that you're called to, the kind of life that you're not only called to as a man, but that you, as a man, are, it's a privilege. It's a great joy. You don't want to give up on this great joy that's available to you as a man. And also, one other thing, by the way, a lot of people don't want to get married because, and I saw a lot of comments like this based on the segment yesterday. They don't want to get married because they're afraid, not just of the system, but also of the statistics, the divorce rate and all of that. And don't let that scare you away either. Because the divorce rate is too high, but it's not true, as you've probably heard, that if you get married, you'll have a 40 to 50% chance of getting divorced. That is not true. The statistics don't work that way. Okay, the people saying that are either ignorant, they don't know how, it's like basic knowledge they don't have. They're not good at analytical reasoning, which is part of it, or they're lying to you. Now, the divorce rate, as you've probably heard, is like 40%. I think that's a little high, but let's just go with it. 40%. Okay, let's just say that is the divorce rate, 40%. Does that mean that if you individually get married, you have therefore a 40% chance of getting divorced? No. That's not what it means. In a similar way, the rate of obesity is about the same. It's about 40%. Does that mean that you, as you're sitting there listening to me right now, you automatically have a 40% chance of becoming obese? No, of course not. The car accident rate is whatever it is. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. But whatever the rate is, does that mean that every time you get behind the wheel of a car, you automatically have that percent chance of having an accident? Is it true that every person on the road has an equal a chance of getting into an accident? Does every person in the country right now have an equal chance of becoming obese? Obviously not. Okay, we could speak in generalities, but in an individual case, your chance is not automatically the same as everybody else's. The rates here are calculated by just taking everyone together and coming up with a percent, but that percent is not predictive for you individually. There are many, many, many simple things you can do to make your own personal chances much lower. The obesity rate is high because lots of Americans eat crappy food and don't exercise enough. But if you do eat healthy food and you do exercise, then your chance of being obese is not 40%. It's like 0%. And same for the divorce rate. The divorce rate is high mostly due to couples who get married and don't even make it 5 years before they're divorced because they do basically everything wrong every step of the way. I mean, that's most divorce. I mean, there are divorces where the man gets totally screwed over. There are divorces where the woman gets totally screwed over. But in the majority of interpersonal conflict, in the majority of cases where a relationship between people, whether it's a marriage or anything else, goes sour, in most of those cases, it's because there's not a simple, oh, well, that was the bad guy in this case. Sometimes that's the case, but usually not. Usually not. And in the cases of a marriage, especially where it falls apart almost immediately, which is like in the first 5 years, counts as almost immediately. In many of those cases, not all, in many of those cases, both people in the marriage do basically everything wrong. I mean, it's just a comedy of errors, which leads to them getting divorced. And those kinds of cases, which are not all of them, you don't need to come and yell at me and say, oh, you're denying that men get screwed in marriage. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is that those kinds of cases, they jack up the divorce rate much, much higher. But those cases and those people aren't predictive for you. And also, the longer you marry, the lower the divorce rate gets. I mean, I've been married for almost a decade and a half. The divorce rate for people who've been married for more than 15 years is significantly lower than the general divorce rate. And if you get more specific, right? Because again, you are not a statistic. You're not a general person. You are an individual. So if you really want to get some better clue of what you're like, if you wanted to come up with some predictive sort of equation, which you shouldn't, but if you wanted to, you would have to start narrowing it down. So for me, I'd have to look at it. Okay, what's the divorce rate for people who are religious? Already it's lower. Have been married for more than 15 years. Already much lower. Have 6 kids, have like 4 or more kids, much lower. So you want to start looking at all that. And for me, like if I were to look at all that, what's the divorce rate for just those 3 big things? 15 years religious and you have a bunch of kids. What's the divorce rate? I don't know. I can't tell you off the top of my head. I don't know that anyone's calculated that. I guarantee you it's very low. It is very, very low. And even that is not predictive for me and my wife. Why is that? Because divorce is a result of choices that people make. And in many cases, it's choices that both people in the marriage make. Sometimes it could be choices that only one person make. If it is a case where you've got just like, the bad guy, you marry someone who turns out to be a total scumbag. Even so the divorce is the result of the choices that person made. Either way, divorce is the result of choices people make. Therefore, if you and your spouse don't make those choices, your divorce rate chance is 0.0%. And the more of those kind of bad choices you make, then the greater the chances that you end up getting divorced. And if you make a lot of really bad choices and you make them really early in your marriage, then your chances of getting divorced are, in fact, very high. So that's the reality of it that I don't think enough people understand. Let's get to the daily cancellation. If your mattress has the supportive qualities of wet cardboard and you wake up each morning feeling like you need an on-call chiropractor, well, then it's time to check out Helix Sleep. Improve your nights and start genuinely sleeping well so you can wake up each morning feeling like you actually got some rest and you're ready to take on whatever the day has in store. I never realized how badly I needed a new mattress until I finally got one. I've had my Helix mattress for years now, and I couldn't be happier with it. I sleep soundly every night, unless I have a kid come in the room and wake me up. Can't blame the mattress for that. It does incredibly well with temperature regulation, which really eases some of those annoying middle-of-the-night wake-ups. Keeping cool and comfortable is essential as the temperature continues to warm up, and we are in the midst of summer right now. Plus, it's easy to connect to other wearable devices so you can actually see the data to back up your sleep improvements each night. No more questioning. What makes Helix different is they don't just sell you a random mattress. They actually match you with the perfect one for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, somewhere in between, they've got you covered. All you got to do is take their sleep quiz and find your ideal match. And trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept on anything else. Right now, it's actually the perfect time to upgrade your sleep because Helix is offering a fantastic sale. Go to helixsleep.com/Walsh to get 27% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Walsh for 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. helixsleep.com/Walsh. We're celebrating a decade of the Daily Wire, 10 years of fighting the culture war and building something real. And how are we celebrating? We're growing fast. More members, more shows, new voices like Isabel Brown, new documentaries like Journey to the UFC, the Joe Pyfer story, premiering this Friday. Not just a fight doc, a blueprint for becoming unstoppable from nothing to UFC stardom through trauma, pain, no excuses. Our members get it all first. The announcements, the first looks, the full truth, no censorship or hidden agenda, just common sense and a community that actually has it. Don't sit this out. Celebrate a decade of Daily Wire. Go to dailywireplus.com and join today. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. Yesterday, the daily cancellation segment was heartfelt and earnest, and I can't have too many segments like that, or people might begin to believe that I'm a human being with a heart and a soul, and can't allow vicious rumors like that to circulate, which means that today we're going to focus on a subject that is a little bit less emotional, though no less important. And that is the subject of airplane dress codes. CBS News in Miami has a report about a woman who was denied entry onto a Spirit Airlines flight because of what she was wearing, or not wearing, as the case may be. Watch.
And these is just regular shorts. This is how I walk through the airport. This is how I walk through the airport with these shorts on. With my robe. This is exactly how I have my clothes.
Your boarding pass, please.
As Tanasia Greyer approached the Spirit ticket counter, tensions quickly grew. She was just told she wouldn't be allowed on her flight back to Chicago.
I'm right here. You need to get out my face. You don't have to address me like that. You can say whatever you need to say from right there. You don't have to get in my face.
You don't get to tell me what to do.
And you don't get to tell me what to do.
Yes, I do.
Greyer says it all started over this outfit she wore to the airport. She says she wore similar shorts while traveling on a plane to Miami on Sunday.
We were getting ready to board the plane, and the lady at the front desk, she stopped me and said, "You're not getting on a plane like that." So I looked at her and I said, "Like what?" She said, "With those shorts." I said, "Everybody here has on shorts. What's the problem with my shorts?" And I've been in this airport for 40 minutes with my shorts and my robe on, and nobody addressed me about my attire. I'm confused. This is crazy.
That voice in the background is Greyer's sister, Jessica Kordelewski. So first, Tanasia says she can't get on her Spirit flight because of her outfit, and then, to make matters worse, she says her sister is arrested for disorderly conduct.
So that passenger, whose name is Tanasia, was wearing essentially underwear with bathrobe. During the interview with CBS, she was also wearing huge bug-eyed sunglasses so that she resembled a large housefly who just rolled out of bed 3 minutes ago. This was all too much for Spirit Airlines to take, apparently. Now, if Tanasia was a person capable of even the slightest amount of self-reflection, this would have been a wake-up call for her. Being told that you're too much of an unkempt slob for a Spirit Airlines flight should be rock bottom. Do you realize just how disheveled, bedraggled, and unsightly you have to look to be denied entry by Spirit Airlines? It's like being told you're too fat for like a Chinese food buffet or too broke for Big Lots. When I was poor and in my early 20s, my card was declined. My credit card was declined at a Dollar Tree. Okay. Like 95 cents for coffee filters. I'm using a credit card. Declined. That level of shame and embarrassment that I felt in that moment is equivalent to what Tanasia should feel, but apparently doesn't. Instead, she alerted the media and did a news interview in her underwear and her bathrobe. Now, it goes without saying, but but I'll say anyway that I'm on the side of the airline in this case. Spirit Airlines is applying a very reasonable standard here. As shocked as I am that Spirit Airlines has any standards at all, apparently they do. The standard is that you got to at least wear clothes. Okay, you got to get up in the morning and change into clothing. I mean, if you can't do that, then you don't deserve to experience the wonder of human flight. And perhaps more importantly, nobody else on the plane deserves the punishment of being forced to sit next to some gross, rumpled weirdo in underwear and a bathrobe. Okay, like, no one, and I see people walking around like this all the time. Of course, we all do. But you're dressed in a way that no one in the world should see you dressed like that. Really at all. I mean, even in your own home, like put some clothes on before you come downstairs. Certainly in public. This is why I've argued many times airlines should all have much stricter dress codes. Requiring that passengers wear clothing of some kind is a good start. We're all going to be trapped on this metal tube together for an extended period of time, and flying through the air 35,000 feet in the sky at 600 miles an hour is miraculous. It's a great privilege. The dress code should reflect those facts, which is why back in the 50s and 60s, passengers wore formal attire on planes. And we should go back to that. Now, I say this as someone who does not put on a suit to board a plane. I'm not claiming that I do. No airline has that dress code. But if any airline ever did roll out that dress code, I would become a devoted customer. And that's not because I enjoy wearing a suit. I really don't. It's because that requirement would weed out obnoxious slobs like Tanasia and her sister. I don't want to share a plane with people like that. I don't want to share any space anywhere, any contacts with people like that. If you're sloppy, loud, rude, and generally disagreeable and unpleasant, I don't want to be around you. Nobody wants to be around you. And all institutions, organizations in this country should start putting rules in place that disqualify and exclude people like that. Now, I know why they don't. Playing to the lowest common denominator seems like it makes business sense. Excluding potential customers, no matter how bedraggled and objectionable they may be, seems like it would hurt the bottom line. That's why standards have plummeted everywhere and our collective quality of life along with it. To put any standards in place at all, to raise the bar even an inch, is to exclude people. And we've been conditioned to believe that excluding people is wrong. Exclusion is the great sin of modern culture. And most business owners think that, it'll eat into their profits. And maybe it will. It's still worth doing for the sake of making our society a more civilized place. But I don't think it'll go that way. I think it'll boost profits in the long run, if not immediately. I'll say this. If there was an airline, again, that strictly enforced even just a business casual dress code, I would only ever use that airline. If there was a grocery store chain with that dress code strictly enforced, I would only ever go to that grocery store. Go down the list. Retail outlets, fast food establishments, convenience stores. I would be a loyal customer to any of them that put a dress code in place. And I think lots of other customers and potential customers would feel the same way. Because our society is being dragged down by the kinds of people who can't follow any rules, for whom any standard of conduct is too onerous, and for whom any code, any requirement is too strict. Well, I don't want to be around those people. No civilized person wants to be around them. And the more that we exclude them, or allow them to exclude themselves, the better things will be. And that is why Tunisia and anyone else who can't dress or act appropriately in public, even enough to qualify for a Spirit Airlines flight, is today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Today on The Ben Shapiro Show, former crack addict and possible actual President Hunter Biden goes on the record and goes hog wild. We examine the future of the Democratic Party in the post-Biden, post-Obama era, and we discuss 2 fraught criminal cases. That's today on The Ben Shapiro Show. Give it a listen.